Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing something I'm very excited about. So in past years I have read the entire Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist and really enjoyed doing that. This year I sort of I'm excited about the Women's Prize shortlist and I look forward to seeing what's on it when it's released. However, there is a new prize this is its inaugural year, called the Carol Shields Prize, and it is essentially a prize for women and non-binary authors from the US and Canada. And that is extremely exciting for several reasons. The first being, I love the inclusion of non-binary authors. I know that the original reason for the Women's Prize for Fiction in the UK was that there was an absence of women on the Booker long list at one point, and so the Women's Prize was created as like a response to that, sort of. But I have been disappointed to see that they have chosen not to include non-binary authors, because I think that a lot of non-binary authors don't necessarily make it to prize lists. So it's wonderful to see that inclusion in the eligibility for this prize. Also, so many times, and this year in particular, there are books on the Women's Prize for Fiction that have not been released in the US, which totally understand the prize is geared towards UK publication time and releases in the UK. So sometimes those books are not released in the US, so it does make them difficult to get a hold of here without purchasing them myself. So I was thrilled to see the Carol Shields Prize, and it has kind of a faster timeline as far as the dates. I'm pulling it up here. So the long list was announced. I actually don't. Let's look. The long list. I believe the long list was announced in March, if I remember correctly. And then the short list was actually already announced. So the short list was announced on April the 6th. And the winner will be announced on May the 4th. So I have the short list at my disposal. So the long list is a wonderful list of books. I will put that up on the screen now. Some of these I already have heard about and was quite excited to see on that list, and others that I have never heard of, which is always fun. But the short list obviously was already announced, and I was really excited because 2 of the 5 books on the short list are books that I already own and was already excited to read completely independently from this list. And so I have decided to read the short list, which you will know if you're clicked on this video, because that's the title. So I have 4 of them here in my hand. The other one I have on audio from my library. So I already owned Brown Girls and Elsewhere. I bought these in Asheville on my birthday trip shortly before this list was actually announced. And then I requested these 2 from my library. So When We Were Sisters and what we fed to the Manticore. What I find interesting about these books, so first of all, they're very short, which I feel like lately the Women's Prize for Fiction has had a lot of chonkers on it. But also 2 of the 5 are told in vignette styles, and then another one is short stories. So the Women's Prize for Fiction is like a novel. It has to be a novel, so short stories aren't eligible. And I feel like a lot of times things that have vignettes don't get on the list, just because those tend to have less words, and the word count is what they go with. Though in recent years, obviously, there have been a couple books that have been on there that had like a vignette style. So I think it's becoming more popular. But I just thought that was an interesting mix. The list is quite diverse, or it seems to be quite diverse, and the topics are all over the place. So I'm really excited to read this list and to dive in and see what I think, and just to like participate in the exciting hype of a new women's / non-binary author prize, and in the US and Canada. So yeah, follow along. Let's see how I feel about the books, and also let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. Let's hop into the video. I'm reading Elsewhere by Alexis Shitikin. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Should have looked that up. This is on the Carol Shields Prize Shortlist, and it is bizarre so far. We're in this town that's kind of like, it's Elsewhere is sort of what they refer to everywhere else, I think, but like these people never leave this town, and people don't generally come to this town. It's like in the mountains, and they have like one supplier that comes every 4 months, and it's interesting. And like mothers go missing from the town. It's very much in the early stages where you're kind of like, what is going on? Like there has to be something, like I feel like there has to be something sinister underlying this, but like, is there? So I don't know. But yeah, so I'm reading that. That's what I'm going to be reading today at the doctor's office, and hopefully I'll make some good headway in this, and I can let you know more about it. Hello. You can see that my office has not been put back together. We had Stanley Steamer come and clean our carpets because they haven't been cleaned since we moved in, and we moved in, like we didn't clean them when we moved in, and we moved in 2019. So they needed it, and it has definitely helped my allergies. But our upstairs is still quite a mess because of it. So I am continuing reading this. I am about 2/3 through this, on page 129 of like 230 something? 226. So I am just under 100 pages from the end of this. And this book is wild. This is also like a very me book, I feel like. At least the first 2/3 have been. So I think there's like 4 parts, and I'm just at part 3. So part 1 and 2. It's very meandering slice of life, but it's also like weird in what's going on here, because you really don't know. And to be honest, I'm not sure we're going to find out, just based on the tone of the book and how things are progressing. But this is very much a book about motherhood. So it's about expectations of motherhood, the way that society kind of views motherhood, the way that other mothers view motherhood, the way that motherhood can feel and be all-consuming. And it is a very... Sorry, we live by a main road, so sirens are just gonna happen. It's a very, like, intense book, and it's, like, intense but quiet. I don't know how to explain that, but, like, that is the vibe. And I am really enjoying it so far. It's set in, like, a mountain town that is cut off from the rest of society. And basically when... and I don't know if I already explained this at all. I might have. When girls grow up and have children and become mothers, they then are like constantly aware of the potential for their affliction to take them. And it's like one day the whole town wakes up and they have like this strange feeling, and then like one of the mothers is just gone. Like all of her stuff is still there. She's just gone. And they have like this whole ritual around what happens the day after a mother is taken or is gone. And yeah, like nobody really knows why it happens or what the point of it is or what causes it to happen. So it's interesting. There has been sort of like a major plot point that happened recently that I think could go either way. It could either explain some things or it could just make it that much more confusing. So I'm very interested to see how this book pans out, and I will let you know. But so far, the one book that I have read, this prize is going well. I'm getting ready to head out the door, but I wanted to quickly update you on this because I finished it last night. Like I think I read 100 pages yesterday because I started part 3 yesterday, and the very beginning of part 3 I was like, ooh, is this gonna be one of those books where I don't like the second half? And then it got, like, after maybe about 10 pages, I got like, oh, okay, no, I'm here, I'm with you. And then it just, yeah, it came full circle from there, and I really enjoyed this. So, like I said before, this is definitely about motherhood. It's kind of like an allegory situation about motherhood, and I think it's really interesting how it plays with like the idea of motherhood consuming women, and just, yeah, how all of that is addressed. It's a very kind of meandering book, but it is also really like tense and impactful, and I loved everything about it except for like that 10 pages. That part I was like, and then everything else was great. So yeah, this is definitely a 5-star for me. So far so good. I'll let you know what I pick up next. Alright, so second book that I will be reading is Brown Girls. This is another book that I picked up when I was in Asheville at Malaprops before the Carol Shields Prize was announced. So already had this one on my radar to read. So obviously reading the 2 I own first. And the great thing about this one is it's told in like vignettes. So they're like really short, sharp chapters. I've already read the whole first half, which is about 40 pages, just in about an hour or so. And yeah, so I love it when things are like vignettes done well, because then it's kind of like snacking where you read like one and you're like, I'll read one more, maybe just one more, or another one. And that's kind of what's happening. And so before you know it, you've read like 60 pages. So love that. This is about a group of girls growing up in Queens, New York. And it's kind of just their coming of age story. And obviously by the title, they are brown girls. So they're from different ethnic backgrounds. Some of them are first-generation immigrants, and some of them are second-generation immigrants. And it's just sort of them navigating coming of age in like a specific time in American culture. So this, I think, is going to be really compelling, and so far I've really enjoyed it, and I'll let you know when I get a little further into it. Well, I finished Brown Girls, and I really enjoyed this. I thought this was like a very fast-paced read, but with a lot to say. The whole story is told, I don't know what perspective it is, but they say we. So instead of it being like one person's story or like alternating between perspectives, it's like a collective we, kind of like a chorus of voices talking about the collective experience of these girls in mostly New York. So it's set in Queens for a part of it, and then it goes into some of the other boroughs and talks about the different paths that these women take throughout their life. There was a really particularly interesting vignette where you have the girls who went to like prestigious schools in Manhattan for high school, and then the ones who chose to stay closer to Queens. and then like how as they get older and they go to different schools and for college and they come back together, the kinds of, it was like two vignettes back to back, and one was like the girls who left Queens and how they viewed the girls who stayed, and then it kind of flipped the script and it was the girls who stayed in Queens and how they viewed the ones who left. And I thought that was so interesting. It didn't do that a lot where it like flipped between perspectives, but I liked how it, you know, it's like this chorus of voices, this collective narrative of these girls, but yet we still get the like brown girls are not a monolith throughout the book, especially in that like one section, but it's also throughout the book. There's a lot of like intersectionality in it around gender and sexuality, and just like life choices in general. And then it's also different. All of these girls are from different cultures, their families came from different places. Some of them are first generation Americans, some of them are second generation, things like that. It was just really interesting and layered. And you'd think sometimes that like vignettes would mean that it would feel choppy or hard to follow, but I actually found it was really well done. And the narrative flowed beautifully. So there are sections, and each section is like a kind of a collection of a point in time. So it's like them as young kids, them in high school, them in college, them right after college. It's like going back to the lands their parents came from, and like marriage and children and just stuff like that, death. Like it deals with a lot of topics, but in a really like cohesive way. It just flowed really well. So really enjoyed this. I give it 4.75 stars. Almost gave it a 5 stars, but like emotionally I don't feel like hugely impacted by it. And usually when I like 5 stars for me are just a feeling. But I did think this is a really, really solid book. And so far I've just really enjoyed the Carol Shields Prize. So I am planning on picking up the physical book of When We Were Sisters next, and the audiobook of The Sleeping Car Porter. So I don't know which one you'll see next, but here we go. All right, before I go get the little one, I did start When We Were Sisters today, and this is by a non-binary author, which is one thing that I think is fantastic about the Carol Shields Prize, is that it includes women and non-binary authors. So it is a much more inclusive prize, in my opinion. And that's wonderful, because I feel like the whole history of the Women's Prize had to do a lot with like amplifying women's voices, because women, like I think it was in response to the Booker Prize and there were no women on the list one year. And so the Women's Prize came about because of that. But I feel like in the same vein, now we're in a time when you don't see a lot of non-binary or trans writers on any of these prize lists. So it's about time a prize included specifically trans authors, non-binary specifically in this case, in their eligibility. So I love that. So this author is non-binary, and this is a book about 3 sisters, and right at the beginning they lose their father. Their mother died years ago, and so they've only ever had their father for quite some time, and they're relatively young. I think the oldest one is like 9 years old, and their father dies, and then it's sort of like what happens to them and their bonds as sisters. And this is another one that is very much, I'm holding the camera so I'll have to show you, like vignettes and kind of interesting formatting. So I thought that was particularly coincidental to the fact that I just read Brown Girls, which has the vignette style. So this, even though it's the biggest book on the list, seems like it's going to be a relatively quick read. I'm already 45 pages into it. So yeah, this is what I will be reading next. All right, I just finished When We Were Sisters. Like I said before, this one is another one that's like got vignettes and very short, not even really chapters. I liked this one a lot. 4.5 stars total rating. It deals with a lot of things. So the three sisters in this lose their parents. I think the oldest one is like 9 years old, and it's about how essentially their uncle, like it's about their bond as sisters and how it like changes over time and what they are to each other and just like their lives after that point. So their uncle takes them in, but really only because he's getting the checks for taking them in because they're orphans. So like he refuses to adopt them because then he wouldn't get money from the government for them. And how he sort of like essentially steals that money and steals the money that is owed to them from their dad's inheritance for them. And they like the poverty and the kind of awful situations that they live in as a result of this. And this man's just like whims of caring about them or not caring about them. And so it's a really sad book in that way. But like, I think it's a wonderful picture of just like sibling relationships and the kind of bond that can develop between siblings, you know, in any situation, but particularly in this situation. But how it still changes and how, you know, each of them want different things and go about their life in different ways. And we follow, I think, the youngest one in the trio, and they kind of have there's a little bit of like felt magical realism, but was more like it's clear that the third sibling is dealing with gender dysphoria, but also is dealing with the trauma in a really different way than their sisters. And we kind of see that, and we see the things that happen to them, and kind of like it just progresses. So like there's sections about their early childhood, sections about when they were living in the apartment with this couple who really cared for them, and then like as one of them goes off to college, and so forth and so on, all the way to the point where they're like older. So I just thought this was a really fascinating and well-paced book, and I liked it a lot. So I would highly recommend this one. It was a relatively quick read, even with all the heavy subject matter in it. Definitely there are trigger warnings for child abuse and sexual assault in this. So know that. I always recommend, if I don't talk about content warnings for any book that I talk about, I try to remember to do that, but I always do that on my story graph. So I have my story graph linked below. So if there's any book that I talked about and you want to check out content warnings before you dive in, I always put my content warnings on when I rate them on StoryGraph. So there you go. I have 2 left. So yeah, let's talk about the other one that I'm currently reading. So I am listening to the audiobook of The Sleeping Car Porter, and I don't remember what this one is completely about. Obviously it's about a man who is a porter on a train. And I just started this one. I'm about 15% into the audiobook, and so far this is the only one that I like right off the bat haven't gelled with. So we're following a man named Baxter. He's a porter on a train for sleeping cars. And so so far we've just sort of been listening to like his daily life as a porter and some of the things that happen I don't know what time period this is set in. I imagine it's not current day just because of some of the like descriptors of the people and of the trains themselves. But it's definitely there already. He's dealing with quite a bit of racism and classism and just things like that. So yeah, I'm not sure where this one's going, and we'll see. We'll see how I feel about it as I get a little further into it. All right, so just a little update on the sleeping car porter. I kind of know what it's about now, but we haven't gotten to like the big part that it talks about in the synopsis. But I'm also just sort of finding this one tedious, if I'm being honest. So the whole, like the beginning of the story is just like explaining the whole porter on a train car situation, giving us an idea of the type of person that Baxter is, what his motivation is, that kind of thing. And then now we are on like a long haul, like 5-day trip across the country, from I think Montreal to Vancouver, and something like a big thing is about to happen from the blurb. I'm at the 50% mark and that thing hasn't happened yet. So, but it's apparently going to happen. And then it's kind of like how all of that works out. But we also have found out, and this is in the synopsis, so I don't feel like it's a spoiler, even though you don't find it out necessarily 100% until you're almost 50% into the book, which is that he is a queer man along with being a black man. So he's kind of dealing with two different things that he is potentially being discriminated against for, and like things that in the time that he's in other him in some way. So it's just like seeing the blatant and also not like the blatant racism and microaggressions like throughout this book from the passengers are, whoo, I mean, it's real. And yeah, that part is hard at times to read about. But also like the whole way that you really find out that he's queer is like, I don't know, it's not my type of thing to read about in books. So yeah, I'm still, so far this is the one I've enjoyed the least, if I'm being 100% honest. I would love to say that all of the books on the Carol Shields shortlist worked for me, but unfortunately the sleeping car porter did not work for me. Yeah, so what I will say about it is it's very visceral. So like you really get the sense of place of being on a train, of this porter who is very sleep deprived. And this is about a particular time in history, around like the train porters, which I don't know a whole lot about that subject or about the history around this. So I feel like maybe if I knew more about that, this might resonate maybe with me a little bit more. I don't know. But I can't say that like having read this book, I am more interested in the subject. I really just was ready for this book to be over, to be honest. It felt very like repetitive and a bit tedious, and like the weird nicknames that he gave to passengers and like the hallucinations and the sexual content, like most of those things just didn't work for me. And I think this is very much a case of this is not a book for me, but there's nothing wrong with the book itself. Like it was, a well-written piece of literature about a specific time in history. And I think with the right audience, it would be a success. I just think this wasn't for me. Mainly the sexual content, sexual content and like the detail of the sexual content is something that I'm never a fan of. So I could have done without that entirely. I will say that, like, when I said it's very visceral. Like, I could feel the uncomfortableness of how sleep deprived this man was. So I'm not sure how much of a synopsis I've given already, because I feel like it took me the longest to read this book, and I listened to it on audio too. But essentially it's about this Porter, Baxter, and he is a Black queer man, and the whole thread is like he's saving up to go to dental school, so that's like in the background of like why he's doing this. But like the whole thing takes place on trains. There's like a small section on one train, then he gets off the train, he does something else, but then the vast majority of the book takes place on a single train that's going from Montreal to Vancouver. So it's like this train ride, and then something happens, the train gets delayed, and like what happens as a result of that, the interactions with the passengers, his job duties, the sleep deprivation is like the main thing in this, and then like the interactions with the other porters, with the other people on the train, the things that he has to worry about. So like there's a lot of that, but like the sleep deprivation took me back to like new motherhood, and I was uncomfy. I did not like that. So, you know, all in all, I think it was a fine book. I'm having a hard time giving it a rating because, like I said, it's not that it's a bad book or that it's poorly written or anything like that. It just wasn't for me. So it's probably like a 3-star. It's something that I'm just sort of like, eh. Like, I don't feel like anything lower than a 3 is justified because, again, not the book's fault. But I can't justify anything higher than a 3 either. So we're just gonna drop it at a 3 and move on. I have read three stories in what we fed the Manticore, which is the second story in here. And I think of the options for using one of the short stories as the title, this is the most like eye-catching, or one that makes you go, huh. But I also think that the story, What We Fed to the Manticore, is not really so far it's been one of the weaker stories that I've read. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this. I went back and read the blurb just to like refresh my mind. And all of the stories are told from the perspective of animals. So I didn't know that. And I think that if that's a thing that you like, this would be really up your alley. Because yeah, they're all told from different animal perspectives. The first one is a donkey who's being painted like a zebra for a zoo. Second one is a tiger. And the third one was a vulture. So different animals and different things going on. I think that this is partly eco-fiction or climate fiction or something like that. So it's like, on the back it says it's exploring themes of environmentalism, conservation, identity, belonging, loss, and family. So yeah, I can see where those things all have come in some way or another already. I love this. I think it can be hit or miss when the perspective is not human, but I am really engaged with this short story collection, and I just want to like pick it up and keep reading, which is amazing. And I'm, I think like 30 or 40% through this. I foresee this being a very quick read. I'm planning to read at least one more story today, and then try to read at least 2 stories the next few days, because I would like to finish this before I head out of town, just because it's a library book and it's a paperback library book, so I definitely don't want to take this on a plane. So yeah, I'm loving this. Highly recommend so far. Hello. I'm wearing my new favorite shirt, which is my goblin I'm Upset for No Reason shirt from Gummy Pony. It also says easily agitated on the sleeves, and it is so soft. I actually filmed a clip for this last night, but I was not feeling well last night, so I had no business filming. So what did I say last night? I finished this. What we fed to the Manticore, and I really liked this. So it's a series of short stories. I went back to my like rating each short story individually and putting like a tab, and then at the end I went through and rated them, like added up the ratings and divided it by the number of short stories to get the actual rating. So actual rating for this for me was like came out to a 4.1 something. So rounded it down to 4, which feels very right to me on this. My favorite story was the one about the whale, which was called The Open Ocean is an Endless Desert. And it was just so beautiful because it was about like this whale who is trying to get to the warm waters for mating season, but this sound keeps breaking up the songs that like lead him to the mating ground. So like the sonar songs that they follow as like a way of life. And this boat with this repeating sound keeps breaking it up, so he keeps getting like the directions are incomplete. And it ultimately is about like poaching and how that can affect the natural order of things. And it's just really beautiful. The writing in this is absolutely stunning. I think, like I've said previously about this, it's definitely eco-fiction, climate fiction. All the stories are told from the perspective of different animals. It takes place in different parts of the world, different climates, and touches on all kinds of different topics. Yeah, I just really liked this. I thought it had a lot to say, and not in like a hit you over the head with a moral kind of way, but in a very like subtle, make up your own mind about what is being said here kind of way. So I thought that was fantastic, and I would definitely read other things from this author. And I am kind of sad that I don't own this, that this book is a library copy, because then I have to remove my little tabs and give it back. It's also got one of the most beautiful covers of anything. So yeah, really enjoyed this one and would highly recommend. All right, so to wrap this up, I feel like this is a lot more straightforward than I expected it to be. Definitely in last place was The Sleeping Car Porter. Like you will have just heard, it just didn't work for me. I think it could work for somebody else. It just wasn't a book for me. And then fourth would be When We Were Sisters, which I thought was a really good book, and I thought the way it was told was really interesting. It just, for me, this one didn't grab me as much as the other 3 that I'm going to talk about. And even just a week later, I feel like this one I don't remember as much as the other ones. So there is that as well. What We Fed to the Manticore, I really enjoyed this short story collection as far as just the varying perspectives, the look at the different ways that climate change and the way we treat our environment and the animals within is affecting these animals. And I just thought this was a stellar book. And then in second, I have Brown Girls, which I thought was fantastic. This one was nearly a 5-star. I just didn't have like the major emotional connection I had with the #1 book, which you already know obviously. But I thought this was so well told. I loved the chorus aspect of this book, and I thought the vignette style writing worked really well for the pace of the book, and just overall this has been one of my favorite things to have read this year, so I would highly recommend this one. And then my clear winner is Elsewhere. I just loved this. I think for me, part of it is that I just like I could relate to some of the things that were being said in terms of like motherhood, although I don't think that being a parent yourself is a requirement of really understanding this book and feeling it deeply. I think it just did some really interesting things with the concept of motherhood in particular, and the way that it can consume you, the way that society treats motherhood, especially in the times we live in right now. But also, it was another book that was very visceral, and like you could really feel the atmosphere and the sense of place, and it just worked for me. Everything about this book worked for me, and I will find myself and have found myself thinking about this book for a while. So, clear winner for me is Elsewhere. This video, I am planning for it to go up either the day before or day of the actual announcement. We'll see if I can get it edited on the plane. But yeah, I think by this point we will know very soon who the actual winner is. And to be honest, I would be happy with any of these winning. I know that The Sleeping Car Reporter wasn't my favorite book of the bunch, but I also can see its merit and could see why someone else would like it, and why it could be a winner. So honestly, I think this is such a strong shortlist for a prize that I would be thrilled to see any of these books win, but I would especially be thrilled to see Elsewhere win. So yeah, look out for the winner of this to be announced on the 4th of May. I am sort of gutted because they're doing the actual announcement at Parnassus in Nashville. And I'm so close to there, but they're doing it on the 3rd, and I will be on my way back from a trip. So I will not be able to be there, but if I could be there in person and the timing wasn't what it is, I would absolutely be there in person, because I am so excited about the Carol Shields prize and the future of this prize, and I look forward to doing more content about this in the future as this prize grows and becomes more, I guess, mainstream. I don't know. I'm just really excited about this. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I would love to hear if you've read any of these, what your thoughts on the books are below. And yeah, I won't be doing any kind of reaction to the winner just because of the timing of it. But look out on my social media. My Instagram is down below. I will probably react there when I find out the winner. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this. If you like this type of content, then please like and subscribe. I would love to have you around for future videos, and I will see you later. Bye!